The first thing Rue Halden noticed about Orvith Station was the smell. Not bad exactly, just old, like recycled air that had been passed through too many filters, breathed by too many species, and given up trying to smell like anything in particular. The second thing she noticed was the Dragon. She had come in on the late cargo shuttle, which meant the station was already running on skeleton staff when she arrived. The docking bay was half-lit. A Sarani clerk processed her transfer papers without looking up. Mosi, her new work partner, met her at the gate with a tired wave and a thermal pack of something warm. Protein broth, Mosi said. Station kitchen closes at second bell. You'll learn to stock up. Rue took the pack and followed him down a long corridor that hummed faintly beneath her boots. The lights overhead were dimmed to night cycle amber. Most of the doors along the hall were shut. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath. They were halfway to the staff quarters when Mosi stopped and pressed himself to one side of the corridor. Rue almost walked into him. "Give him room," Mosi said quietly. Rue looked up. The Dragon was coming down the corridor from the far end. He was enormous, easily twice her height, moving on two legs with a low, steady gait that barely made a sound despite his size. His scales were dark copper, the color of old machinery left in damp air. His wings were folded tight against his back. In one hand, he carried a battered datapad. In the other, a set of manual override keys on a heavy ring that he walked past them without stopping. He glanced at Rue, just once, amber eyes catching the dim light, and gave a small nod. Then he moved on, paused at the door at the far end of the corridor, checked something on his datapad, and locked the door with a solid, deliberate click. Rue watched him move to the next door. "Who is that?" she asked. "Dravik," Mosi said. "Night custodian. Been here longer than anyone on current staff." He started walking again. "Don't worry about him. He does his rounds every night. Just keep clear and let him work." "What is he checking?" "Doors, vents, pressure panels, seal integrity on the airlocks." Mosi shrugged. "Custodian stuff." Rue looked back over her shoulder. Dravik had moved to another door. "Same process. Check the pad. Try the handle. Lock it if it was unlocked. Log it. Move on." He didn't rush. He didn't skip anything. "Does he do that every night?" she asked. "Every single night," Mosi said. "Even on rest days. Even during station holidays when literally no one else is working." Rue watched until Dravik turned a corner and disappeared from view. She told herself it was just curiosity. New place, unfamiliar faces, the mind looking for things to anchor to. She followed Mosi to the staff block, dropped her kit in her assigned room, and spent the first hour going over her maintenance rotation schedule. Her shift started at 6 bell. She would be covering the lower decks, water recyclers, atmosphere processors, the secondary power junction on Ring 3. Standard work. The kind of job she had done on 4 other stations before this one, that she was almost asleep when she heard it, a faint pressure warning tone, brief and soft, coming from somewhere in the walls. One short pulse, then silence. She sat up, checked the time. 3rd bell. She waited for the follow-up alarm, the kind that meant something was actually wrong and the system wanted a response. Nothing came. She lay back down. Probably a routine fluctuation. The old stations did that. Their systems had been patched so many times that minor warnings sometimes fired and reset themselves before anyone needed to respond. She was nearly asleep again when a thought pushed its way up through the tiredness. She got up, went to the small wall panel beside her door, and pulled up the station's live log feed. She scrolled back through the last 10 minutes. The pressure warning had registered at 3rd bell, Deck 4, Corridor 9, secondary airlock seal. It had lasted 6 seconds. Then it had been manually reset and logged. The log entry read, "Seal compression low. Manual adjustment applied. Monitoring." Rue stared at the entry for a moment that he had caught it. In the middle of his rounds, in the middle of the night, he had caught a 6-second pressure warning and fixed it before the automated system had even decided whether to escalate it. She put the pad down and went back to bed, but she lay there in the amber dark of the station night, thinking about a dragon who walked every corridor alone, checked every door, and logged every small broken thing. Not because anyone asked him to, but because those were the things that needed doing. She decided she was going to pay more attention to Dravik, not in a way that would bother him, just in the way that Rue had always paid attention to the people who kept things running while everyone else slept. It was, she thought, the least a person could do. Outside in the corridor, somewhere down on deck 4, a door clicked shut. Locked. Solid. Secure. The station breathed on. By the end of her second week, Rue had learned 3 things about Orville Station. The first was that the water recyclers on Ring 2 had a vibration issue that nobody had bothered to fix because it was annoying rather than dangerous, and she fixed it herself on her 3rd shift because the sound was driving her up the wall. The second was that Mosi made excellent strong tea from a small stash he kept locked in his tool cabinet, and he was generous with it to people he liked. The third was that Dravik's rounds followed the same path every single night, but they never took exactly the same time. She had started noting it down. Night 1, 2 hours, 14 minutes. Night 2, 2 hours, 31 minutes. Night 3, 1 hour, 58 minutes. Night 4, 2 hours, 49 minutes. The path was the same. The time changed. That meant he was stopping somewhere different each night, spending longer in certain places. Something was always taking more attention than the night before. She asked Mosi about it one evening while they were resealing a coolant line on the lower deck. Does Dravik ever explain what he's doing on his rounds? Like beyond the basic door checks? Mosi passed her the sealant tool without looking up. He files log entries. I've read them. They're minimal. That's Dravik. Mosi leaned back and stretched his neck. He doesn't talk about his work. He just does it. 3 years I've been on this station. I've had maybe 15 conversations with him longer than 2 sentences. Does that bother you? Mosi thought about it. No, he's not rude. He's just contained. You know the type. Some people process things by talking. He processes things by doing. Rue nodded and kept working. That night, coming off shift at 5th Bell, she crossed paths with Dravik in a corridor outside the atmosphere processor bay. He was crouched beside a wall panel, the cover removed, his large hands working with surprising precision on a small pressure valve inside. He had tools laid out on the floor next to him in a careful row. She stopped. That valve wasn't on the repair list, she said. He glanced at her. No. Was it flagged? No. She looked at the valve. It was worn, the threading visibly degraded, the seal around it slightly discolored from heat stress. Not broken. Not yet. But close. How did you know it needed attention? She asked. Dravik was quiet for a moment, fitting a new seal over the valve housing. The vibration pattern in this section changed about 10 days ago. Very slight. The automated system did not register it as abnormal, but it was not the same as before. Rue stared at him. You noticed a vibration change that the sensors missed. I walk these corridors every night, he said simply. You learn what they sound like when everything is correct. He replaced the panel cover, collected his tools in the same careful way, and stood. Will you log it? She asked. Yes. Under your custodial routine. A pause. Yes. Rue watched him walk away, and something that had been forming in the back of her mind for 2 weeks started to take a clearer shape. She went to the maintenance archive that evening after dinner and started pulling old logs. Not the current ones, the old ones. She went back 5 years, then 8, then 12. The entries were there, scattered through years of station records. Small, quiet, filed under custodial routine, which meant they were never reviewed by engineering, never assessed by the operations team, never connected to each other by anyone who might have seen the pattern. Worn gasket replaced. Ring 3 airlock, corridor 7. Pressure variance corrected, deck 4 ventilation junction. Coolant microfracture sealed, secondary power bay. Atmospheric filter housing realigned. Ring 2. Dozens of them. Hundreds, once she widened the search. Every single one attributed to Dravik. She sat back and looked at the list on her screen. None of these repairs were glamorous. None of them would have made a report or earned a commendation. Half of them were the kind of thing that might never have caused a serious problem. But some of them, the seal failures, the pressure variances, the microfractures, those could have cascaded. Given the right combination of circumstances, given a week of being ignored, some of these could have become emergencies. And they hadn't. Because every night, while the station slept, Dravik walked the corridors and found the things that were quietly going wrong, and he fixed them before they became something worse. Mosi appeared at the door of the records room with 2 cups of tea. "You've got that look," he said. "What look?" "The look where you found something and you're not sure what to do with it." He set a cup down beside her and looked at her screen. His expression shifted slightly. "Dravik's logs? 12 years of them." Mosi was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said finally. "I know. Did you ever tell anyone?" He wrapped both hands around his cup. "I mentioned it to the operations lead 2 years ago. She said she'd look into it." He shrugged. "She didn't." Rue looked back at the screen. Outside, somewhere in the station's long amber corridors, a door clicked shut. Then another. Then another. The inspection notice came on a regular Tuesday, tucked between a supply delivery update and a routine staff memo about the canteen closing early for cleaning. Rue almost missed it. Commander Pello's office had requested a structural integrity review of the station's primary grid. Routine, the notice said, scheduled as part of the Regional Transit Authority's 5-year audit cycle. An engineering team would arrive within 30 days. Mosi read it over her shoulder and made a low sound. "Pello's going to have a difficult month." "Why?" Rue asked. "Because the last time anyone ran a real check on the primary grid was 6 years ago." He took a slow sip of his tea, and that report was not flattering. Rue read the notice again. Then she went back to the maintenance archive and found the 6-year-old structural report. It took her 20 minutes to work through the technical language, but the conclusion was not hard to understand. The station's primary integrity grid, the network of sensors, pressure regulators, and structural monitors that kept track of the station's overall physical health, had been running at reduced capacity. Sensor clusters in the lower hull had degraded. 2 of the 4 primary monitors covering the docking arm junctions were operating at partial function. The report had recommended immediate repairs. The repairs had not been made. She cross-referenced the date of the report with Dravik's logs. Starting from around that same period, his nightly entries became more frequent, more detailed. He had begun logging small stress indicators in the lower hull sections. He had started checking the docking arm access corridors on his rounds, even though they were not part of his assigned area. He had known. 6 years ago, he had known the official systems were not going to catch everything, so he had quietly expanded his own coverage to fill the gap. Rue closed the archive and sat very still for a moment. Then she found the incident report Dravik had filed 3 years. 8G.IT was a single page, brief and precise. He had noted that the asteroid anchor point, the massive anchor connecting the station to the stable rock formation that kept it in position, was showing irregular stress patterns. The asteroid itself appeared to be slowly shifting along a deep internal fault. Not fast, not dramatically, but consistently. And the stress on the station's lower docking arms and hull sections was increasing as a result. He had filed the report, marked it urgent, and submitted it to the station commander's office. The report had been logged as received, marked reviewed, and closed. Reviewed and closed. Pello's digital signature was on the closure. Rue printed the page. She held the paper in her hands. She read it again. Then she went looking for Dravik. She found him at the end of the 3rd bell on the lower deck, running a manual pressure check along the docking arm junction corridor. He was working methodically, pressing a calibration tool against each joint, housing, and sequence, reading the numbers, logging them. She stood back until he finished the row. Then she stepped forward and held up the printed report. He looked at it. He did not look surprised. "You filed this," she said. "Yes. 3 years ago. You told them the asteroid was shifting. You told them the docking arms were under increasing stress." She kept her voice level, and they closed the report. "Yes," he said again. "Why didn't you escalate? Go above Pello? Contact the transit authority directly?" Dravik looked at her for a long moment. The amber light of the lower deck made his copper scales look darker, older. When he spoke, his voice was even, not bitter, not defeated, just honest. "I am a custodian," he said. "When I file a report, the people above me decide what to do with it. I filed the report. I followed the procedure. What happened after that was not in my hands. So you just kept doing your rounds. What else would I do?" He turned back to the junction housing. The stress was still there whether the report was acted on or not. The doors still needed checking. The seals still needed monitoring. If I stopped doing my rounds because no one listened, the station would be less safe, not more. Rue wanted to say something sharp about bureaucratic negligence, and the people who signed off on closed reports they never actually read. She swallowed it. How bad is it? She asked instead. Right now. How bad? He was quiet for a moment. The asteroid has shifted approximately 4 meters along the fault line in 3 years. The stress load on the lower docking arm joints has increased by roughly 18%. He replaced the calibration tool in its case. I've been compensating manually, redistributing pressure loads where I can, replacing worn joint seals before they fail. He paused. I cannot do that indefinitely. Rue looked down the long corridor. The joints he had just checked ran along the base of the docking arm structure. Beyond them, through the outer hull, was the asteroid, and beyond that, open space. The inspection team, she said. The one coming in 30 days. Yes, Dravik said quietly. That is why I've been checking these joints every night instead of every third night. He picked up his data pad. He moved to the next joint in the row. Rue stood in the low amber light and thought about 18%. About 4 meters. About a dragon who had been holding a station together with careful hands and night rounds because the people in charge had looked at an urgent report and decided it could wait. She thought about how long a person could keep compensating before compensating was no longer enough. She went back upstairs and started writing her own report. There was an hour, somewhere between 4th bell and 5th, when the station went truly quiet. The late shift wound down. The kitchen sealed up. The few staff members who kept odd hours retreated to their rooms. The corridors emptied out until the only sounds of the low hum of the atmosphere processors and the distant pulse of the docking arm regulators doing their slow, automated work. Dravik had called it the still hour once, in passing. Rue had not forgotten the phrase. She found him during the still hour on a Thursday, sitting on a crate outside the lower cargo access corridor, filling in his nightly log by hand rather than typing it. He wrote slowly and precisely, each entry clear and deliberate. She had noticed before that he preferred to write certain things by hand. She had never asked why. She sat down on the floor nearby. Not close enough to crowd him. Just nearby that he did not tell her to leave. They stayed like that for a while. She listened to the hum of the station. He wrote. Eventually she said, "Can I ask you something personal?" He did not look up. "You can ask. Your contract here ended a long time ago. You stayed." She kept her voice quiet, matching the hour. "Why?" Dravik stopped writing. He looked at the page for a moment, then closed the pad and set it across his knee. "Among my people," he said, "a nest is not a temporary thing. You do not choose a nest the way you choose a place to sleep for a night. When a Verith claims a space, when they guard it, learn its sounds, know its weak points, it becomes part of them." He looked at the corridor ahead. "I came here on a labor contract. I did my work. The contract ended, and I was supposed to go. But by then I knew this station. I knew where it was strong. I knew where it was not." He paused. Leaving felt like abandonment. Rue turned that over in her mind. Even though the people here don't know your name half the time, the people in Nest do not have to know the dragon is there, he said. That is not the point of guarding. Rue thought about her home colony. It had been a hard place, an industrial rock in the outer belt, always running short on something. The maintenance crews there had worked double shifts for years during the budget cuts. They had kept the water recyclers running, kept the heat cycling, kept the air breathable. Most of the people living there had never learned their names either. "I grew up in a place like this," she said. "Not a station. A colony. Rock mining mostly. There were people who kept everything running. They worked nights. They worked through the bad seasons. They fixed things nobody asked them to fix because they could see what would happen if they didn't." She looked at her hands. "When I left for my first posting, I realized I had never actually thanked any of them. I just assumed it would always be working because it always had been." Dravik was quiet. "Someone was making that happen," she said. "Someone was always making that happen. I just couldn't see them." "Most cannot," Dravik said. There was no anger in it. Just the plain, worn weight of a thing that had been true for a very long time. "I see you." Rue said at IT was a simple thing to say. She meant it simply. But Dravik looked at her with an expression she could not fully read on a Verith face. Something careful, almost cautious, like a person who has been told good news before and learned not to let themselves believe it too quickly. "You understand," he said finally. It was not a question. I think I do, she said. Another silence. Comfortable this time. You are writing a report, he said. She blinked. How did you know? You have been in the records room for 3 evenings. You are reading the original incident logs. You have that look you get when you are deciding something. He tilted his head slightly. I have seen it before. On younger staff members who arrive here and find the logs and decide to do something about what they find. Did it ever work? She asked. When other people tried? He considered. Once, partially. A technician 6 years ago raised concerns about the sensor clusters. The clusters were replaced. The underlying structural issue was not addressed. He picked up his pad again. But it was something. Dead slowly. I'm going to push harder than a partial fix. I know, he said. I'm going to make sure your name is on every single repair you've made. Every logged entry, every manual fix, every night you caught something before it became a crisis. She looked at him directly. People are going to know what you did here. Dravik was quiet for a long moment. That is not why I did it, he said at last. I know, she said. That's exactly why it matters. He returned to his writing. She sat with him through the rest of the still hour. When he rose to finish his rounds, she walked with him as far as the end of the corridor to the last door. He checked his pad, tried the handle, found it unlocked, and locked it with the same solid, deliberate click she had heard on her very first night. He stood there for a moment with his hand against the door. You always pause at the last one, she said. The last door is the hardest, he said. Not the lock. Just knowing that after it, you must trust that everything behind you is secure, that you did enough. He lowered his hand. Some nights that is easy. Some nights it is not. He moved off into the amber corridor. Rue stood at the locked door for a moment, thinking about what enough meant, and how often the people who truly gave enough were the last ones anyone thought to ask. Then she went upstairs and finished her report. Rue submitted her escalation report on a Friday morning, bypassing Commander Pello's office entirely and filing directly with the Regional Transit Authority's Structural Oversight Division. She attached 12 years of Dravik's maintenance logs. She attached the original incident report Pello had signed off as closed 3 years ago. She attached her own analysis of the docking arm stress data. She wrote a clear, plain summary at the top that anyone could read without technical training, and she made sure Dravik's name appeared in it 17 times. Then she went to work. Pello called her to his office by noon. The commander was a mid-sized Serenee, pale, damp-skinned, with a flat, unhurried expression of someone who had spent 20 years making problems smaller on paper rather than fixing them in practice. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. You bypassed the internal review process, he said. The internal review process closed an urgent structural report without acting on it. Rue said. That report was assessed by qualified personnel. It was signed and filed in 4 days. The asteroid fault data alone should have taken 2 weeks to assess properly. Pello's expression did not change. Your posting here is provisional. You are 2 months into a 6-month review period. Rue met his eyes. I know. She left his office. She went back to work. Mosi was waiting for her at the Ring 2 junction with a look that mixed admiration and genuine concern in equal parts. Pello is angry, Mosi said. Yes. Are you going to be okay? I don't know yet. He handed her a cup of tea. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think you did the right thing. The Transit Authority response came faster than anyone expected. An acknowledgement arrived within 6 hours. A priority inspection dispatch notice arrived the next morning. The inspection team would arrive in 8 days. Not 30. Pello sent a second message to Rue. She did not respond. The asteroid shifted on the 5th day after she filed the report that IT did not announce itself. There was no dramatic warning tone, no station-wide alarm countdown. One moment the lower deck was humming normally. The next, a deep, grinding vibration moved through the floor of Ring 3, and 3 separate pressure warnings lit up across the docking arm junction board simultaneously. Rue was in the atmospheric bay when it happened. She heard the grind through the soles of her boots before the board even registered it. She was moving before the first alarm sounded. The corridor outside the docking arm junction was already showing stress fractures in 2 of the joint housings. A pressure seal on the lower cargo ring had failed and atmosphere was bleeding from the connecting passage into the buffer zone. In the docking bay, a cargo crew of 4, 2 humans and 2 Sarani dock workers, had no idea the corridor behind them was losing integrity. Dravik was already there. She did not know how he had arrived so fast. Later, Mosi told her that Dravik had felt the vibration change 20 minutes before the alarms, the way he felt everything in the station, through years of knowing what it sounded and felt like when it was right. He had already been heading to the junction when the fractures formed, that he moved with a speed and certainty that left no room for hesitation. He did not shout or cause panic. He reached the cargo crew, spoke 4 words, "This way, come now," and shepherded them through the secondary access door before the main corridor pressure dropped below the safe threshold. He sealed the secondary door behind them with a manual crank that required a grip no one else on the station could have managed as fast as he did. Then he moved to the junction board. Rue reached him 2 minutes later. She took the right side of the board without being asked, reading the pressure values and calling them out while he worked the manual rerouting controls. The vocabulary of crisis was the same in any language: numbers, states, actions. They worked without wasted words. The IT took 40 minutes to stabilize, AT the end of it. 3 docking arm joint seals had been manually clamped. 2 pressure zones had been rerouted through backup lines that Dravik had inspected and maintained specifically for situations like this. And the atmosphere bleed had been sealed. The station was intact, and O1 had been hurt. The cargo crew stood in the secondary corridor, looking shaken and deeply confused about why a custodian had known exactly where to take them before anyone had called an emergency. Or the old reptilian dock worker who had been at Orvith longer than almost anyone, looked at Dravik as the amber emergency lights faded back to standard and said quietly, "You knew it was going to go." "I knew it was close," Dravik said. Ort nodded, slow and deliberate. "You've been knowing things were close for a long time." Dravik did not answer. He was already logging the incident. That night, after the emergency teams had done their documentation and the station had settled into its uneasy post-crisis calm, Dravik's comm panel chimed. The ID marker said it was from a Verith Station 2 sectors over. He answered it, the younger voice. Female, with the rougher edge of a Verith who had not yet grown fully into her scale, said, "I heard about Orvith. Are you safe?" "Yes, Yenna," Dravik said. "I am safe." A pause. "Are you coming home?" "After the inspection, maybe. You could request a transfer." Dravik looked out the small porthole window at the dark rock of the asteroid, massive and still, anchoring the station in place. "I am home," he said. The line was quiet for a moment. "All right," Yenna said softly. "All right." Outside in the corridor, Rue sat on the floor with her back against the wall and her hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea, listening to the station settle around her, thinking about how close 40 minutes could be. The inspection team arrived 3 days later. They brought 12 people and a very long list of questions. The first name on their inquiry list was Dravik's. The inspection team spent 9 days on Orvith Station. They were thorough in the way that organizations are thorough when they have realized, too late, that something serious was missed on their watch, and they are now trying to understand the full shape of the failure. They pulled every log. They interviewed every senior staff member. They ran physical checks on every joint, every seal, every section of hull that Dravik's records had flagged over the past 12 years. Rue gave her testimony on day 2. She was factual and complete and did not editorialize, though it took some effort. Mosi gave his on day 3. He was also factual and also clearly angry and slightly less careful about not editorializing. Ort gave his on day 4. He did not say much, but what he said was specific and precise and carried the weight of someone who had watched things happen for a very long time and was glad, finally, to have somewhere to put that weight. Dravik gave his on day 5. He sat with the inspection team for 4 hours. He answered every question directly. He brought his data pad, the old one, the original, filled with years of handwritten entries, and laid it on the table without being asked. He did not perform anger or grief or vindication. He simply told them what he had done, how he had done it, and WHYT 1 point, the lead inspector, A tired-looking human woman named Adra set down her stylus and said, "Why didn't you contact us directly?" Years ago, after the report was closed, Dravik considered the question carefully. "I did not believe it would change anything," he said. "And if I spent my energy trying to change what people above me would or would not do, I would have had less energy for the actual work." He paused. Someone had to keep doing the actual work. Adra looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked her stylus back up and wrote something down that she did not read aloud. The report was published on day 10. Commander Pello was reassigned to a desk posting in the Transit Authority's Administrative Review Division, a position described in the official language as lateral, which everyone understood to mean the opposite of a promotion. He left without saying anything to Rue, which was fine. The station was placed on a repair schedule. Real engineers with real equipment coming to address the asteroid fault, reinforce the docking arm structure, and replace the degraded primary integrity grid. It would take months. During that time, Orvith would operate at reduced capacity, some docking arms closed, traffic rerouted. Nobody was pleased about the inconvenience. Nobody argued that it wasn't necessary. Dravik was offered a formal contract as a structural maintenance consultant, a real title, real pay, recognition in the station's official staffing record for the first time in over a decade. The contract acknowledged his prior contributions in formal language that Rue had personally reviewed and pushed the legal team to make stronger twice. He signed it on a quiet afternoon, in the same unhurried way he did everything. Rue was there. So was Mosi, who had brought tea. So was Ort, who stood in the doorway and said nothing but stayed for the whole thing. Afterward, Rue asked Dravik how it felt. He thought about it honestly. "Strange," he said. "The work is the same. The corridors are the same. Nothing about what I do each night will change." He turned the signed copy of the contract over in his hands. "But it is acknowledged. That is a different thing than I expected it to be." "Different how?" she asked. "I did not think it would matter to me," he said. "I told myself for many years that it did not matter, that the work was what mattered." He set the contract down. "I think I was half right." Rue smiled. "Only half. The work does matter," he said. "But the work being seen, that matters also. I did not let myself want that for a long time, because wanting something you cannot have is a particular kind of suffering." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not used to having it." That night, Rue came off her shift early and found Dravik beginning his rounds at the usual time. She fell in a step beside him without asking that he looked at her. He did not tell her to go. They walked the corridors together in the amber dark. She watched how he moved, the way he checked each door, tested each handle, logged each entry with the same care he had given it for 18 years. She had thought, watching him the first time, that the ritual looked like habit. She understood now that it was not habit at all. Habit was something you did without thinking. Dravik checked every door thinking. Every door was a choice made again, deliberately, the same as it had been made the night before, and the night before that. The last door at the end of the long lower corridor. He stopped. He checked his pad. He tried the handle. Unlocked. Someone had come through late and not secured it, and he locked it with the key from his ring. The same solid, deliberate click she had heard on her very first night on the station. Then he stood there with his hand against the door. Rue stepped forward and placed her hand on the door beside his, just to feel it. The faint vibration of the station, the steady pulse of systems running correctly, the deep structural hum of something large and old and still holding together. They stood like that for a moment. "Everything's sealed?" she asked. "Everything's sealed," he said. He lowered his hand. He made his final log entry for the night, neat and precise, the last line of a record that now had a name properly attached to it. Then he looked at the locked door one more time. For the first time in 18 years, Dravik had locked the final door and was not standing there alone. He turned and walked back up the corridor, and Rue walked beside him, and the station breathed on around them, steady, secure, held together by years of careful hands and the simple, stubborn decision to keep. Showing up, the amber lights hummed. The doors held. Outside in the dark, the asteroid drifted on its slow, ancient path. And for tonight, it did not matter because everything that needed to be done had been done, and the dragon knew it.